My Dreaming. So welcome to my channel. Thanks for dropping by. Now today is, well, it's a video that I wasn't going to make because basically I was just going to make these bath bombs, and then I thought, well, as I'm making them I might as well video them. Now it's the start of 2025 and for Christmas in 2024, gosh, I made so many bath bombs and I'm completely sold out of them. So this is the first time I've sort of come back to make some more bath bombs. And really what I'm doing today is, my main aim for today is to test out a new bath bomb mould that I'm hopefully going to start using. And it's a really cute little gnome with a love heart in it. Now, I know at I Dream in Soap we sell quite a lot of 3D printed things, but bath bomb moulds is not something I've ever got into, and I've taken the decision that it's not something I'm going to get into, and so therefore I do buy all my bath bomb moulds. My favourite supplier for bath bomb moulds is Cada Molds, and I always get my moulds from there. And I do find it's quite important to support other makers and that, so that's why I tend not to print my own moulds. I do actually buy them. Now this one, if people have bought stuff off me, you might realise this is sort of in I Dream in Soap colours. Now what Cada Molds do nowadays is they'll obviously sell you an actual mould, but they'll also sell you the file that you need if you have a 3D printer, so you can print your own mould. So therefore, for me that's great, because being in the UK I then don't have to deal with shipping and any custom charges and waiting for it to arrive. The disadvantage, I think, a little bit is sometimes it's getting the settings exactly the same as Cada might have got them. So therefore I'm just obviously testing this mould just to make sure I've got no bits that are snagging on it or anything. I might need to do a little bit of sanding just to make sure it's perfectly smooth and working correctly. Okay, so this is this mould. So I know people will ask in the comments below, am I going to sell this mould? Absolutely not. If you want to buy this mould or buy the file to print your own mould, if you've got a 3D printer, you need to go to Cada to get it. I will not be selling this mould. It's not something I can do. I don't have the rights to it. I have the rights to buy it and use it to make my bath bombs, and obviously I can sell my bath bombs, but I won't be selling the mould. So just make sure that's clear, just because I know people will ask in the comments. So Cada Molds, I'll leave a link in the description if you want to go and buy some of their moulds or look at what they've got. Right, now bath bombs, I don't do a lot of these on my channel. I'm not a bath bomb expert. I do make a lot of them. I mean, we made, gosh, over 1,000 bath bombs for Christmas, and we came back with 2 bath bombs. That was the only ones we came back with. I have a pretty simple recipe. Now again, recipe wise, I know people will often ask for a recipe. Mine's pretty simple. What I believe with bath bombs is that you really want to start off with a basic, simple recipe. Just something like your bicarb, your citric acid, maybe add some SLSA in there if you want a little bit of bubble. And then you just want some sort of binder. So some oil is typically nice to put in. And binder, I just use distilled water for my binder. I find it works really well. Now I'm emptying my dry powder out of this bag, just because I master batch all my bath bombs, so therefore I will have gone through when I'm making bath bombs and I'll get like 30 bags lined up, and I'll just put the portions in that I need for everything. Okay, but mine's a really simple recipe, and I would advise if you're starting out making bath bombs, you know, just start out with the basics and tinker with that. Because the problem with getting a recipe off somebody else is each person's recipe is unique from the point of view of where you're located, what your humidity is. And one recipe that can work for one person just won't work for another person. So it's really important to start with a simple recipe, get that right first. Then you can add extra bits. If you want to add weird stuff, you want to add clays or anything like that, you can then add that in when you've got your base recipe right. Okay, so here's my base recipe in here. everything apart from my citric acid. I'll always leave my citric acid out because what we want to do is we want to get everything mixed first without the citric acid in, because as soon as you start adding moisture to citric acid, it will start fizzing and foaming. It'll start activating. Whereas you can add moisture to your dry mix, your bicarb, your SLSA, your clays, whatever else you've got in there, and it will be absolutely fine. Also for this one, I'm just doing it as a white bath bomb. And then what happens with our bath bombs that are white is Paul does a wonderful job of painting them all for me. Okay, so there's my basics. Right, my oils, my liquids. Let's just get those measured out. I use apricot kernel oil in mine. I like apricot kernel oil because it obviously binds well in the bath bomb. Also as well, it does, you know, give some sort of nice qualities in the bath water, but it doesn't tend to leave a greasy residue. I mean, I've got some polysorbate 80 in my recipe as well anyway to stop that happening. So right, I'm just going to weigh out my apricot kernel oil. My polysorbate 80. And you tend to use with polysorbate 80 sort of half the polysorbate 80 to the amount of oil that you've got. Now the fragrance that I'm using for these is a lovely fragrance. It's almond milk. I originally bought this fragrance to use in soap, but I found, certainly for me, it didn't really hold well in the soap. I'm going to test it again because it is a gorgeous fragrance, but I get this from NI Candle Supplies. It works really beautifully in bath bombs. It doesn't discolour or anything, and it's a lovely sort of almond milk, like a Bakewell tart type fragrance, and I think that's great, and it's going to work well with these gnomes because it's sort of like a Valentine theme, so I think sort of Bakewell tart, that sort of thing, going to be a lovely fragrance. So just get my fragrance in. There we go. Oh, I can smell that already. It's a lovely fragrance, really sort of like marzipan-y, Bakewell tart, that sort of thing. Right, so here's my dry ingredients. Now, if I was colouring these bath bombs, I would typically be colouring them with lakes. I use a lake in the outside of my bath bomb, but I use dyes in my embeds. And the lake I would mix in with the dry powder here and get that mixing in now. But these are going to be white, so I'm not going to have any lakes in here. So I'm just going to get my liquids. I'm just going to pop that in. And at this stage, I find that you just really want to mix it quite a lot. I find you sort of almost can't over mix it at this stage. So a little bit tricky to get my mixer in the screen, but I'm sure you know what a mixer looks like. To use it backwards so I can get it sort of a bit on the screen. Right, so I'm just going to start that off. And by not having the citric acid in there, we're quite safe with this liquid in here to be mixed. Oh, that fragrance is gorgeous. Now, I typically find with whatever mixer you use, I must admit I haven't used them all, I'm sure there are some super duper ones out there, that you're going to have to keep scraping down the sides just to make sure everything is mixed together. Now you might do this by hand, that's absolutely fine if you haven't got a mixer to do it with. So I'm just going to put that back on the mixer now and just give it a really good mix, and then I'll come back when that's mixed and I'm happy with it. I am now happy that this had a really good mix and is looking good. So the next thing we need to do is add our citric acid. Now with my citric acid, I always grind mine up, and I grind it fresh as it were. I have tried in the past taking a whole load of citric acid and grinding it up and then storing it so I can just scoop it out. But then it just clumps together really hard, so I find it best to do it fresh. I've got one of these NutriBullet things, these Ninja NutriBullets. So I'm just going to grind it in there. So just pop it into the grindy thing. Pop it onto the NutriBullet. I know you can't see that. And then I will turn the sound down on this because this is really loud and just give it a grind. Now I don't grind it for very long. I just really want to turn it into a smaller grain, as it were, so it's more powdery, and that gives you a lovely smooth bath bomb. So I'm just going to add that into the top there. And just get the rest of it. You should really put a mask on, and I normally do when I'm grinding my citric, because it does get up into the air and it's not great, but obviously then you can't hear me on the video. Okay, I'm just going to grind this second amount. Okay, so yeah, with your recipe, sort of start with a 2-to-1 ratio, bicarb, twice as much bicarb as you do citric. Pop in a little bit, tiny bit of SLSA if you want a little bit of bubbles. Now the thing with SLSA in bath bombs is it will create a little bit of foam, but it will slow down the fizzing reaction of your bath bomb. So if you want your bath bomb to last a bit longer, you can put in a little bit more SLSA. If you want it to fizz faster, then you're going to put in a little bit less. Now you might think, well, I want my bath bomb to last for ages. The problem with a bath bomb that lasts for ages, they can be very anticlimactic. They can just literally blob in your bath and just be so foamy that they're just like a foamy blob, and they're not actually doing the lovely fizzing and spinning that a bath bomb will do. So just be a little bit careful. You don't need very much SLSA in at all. Sort of somewhere between, I find between 1% and 2% of your recipe is going to be fine. Okay, so I'm just going to get that mixed in, and again I'll give that a really, really good mix, and I'll just come back when that's done. So here's my mix all mixed up now. It looks a bit boring, doesn't it, in white, but I think it looks pretty actually. So what we now need to do is test to see if we think it's going to bind together. And again, this is something that it can be quite difficult to tell, and a lot of it will once again depend on your humidity, you know, where you're working. And also it will depend on the type of mould you're pressing into. So first thing you can do is grab it and drop it. And can you see how mine broke apart there? I've grabbed it, I've squeezed it, and I've dropped it. And I think, to be honest, it's not quite binding together. It's very close, but not quite. So what I will do is I will add a little bit, I use distilled water as my binder. Now this is where you need to be really careful. I'm trying to use this machine backwards. Anytime you add your binder at this stage, so let's turn that off. Anytime you add your binder at this stage, you will get a little bit of activation of your citric. But that's okay, mix it in quick, and it's that activation that will start causing the bath bomb to bind together. Now you don't want to put much extra in there at all. Literally I put 5 little squirts in there in mine, just a little bit at a time. And again I'm going to have to, my mixer's a bit rubbish, we're only just mixing in the centre. I actually have got a different mixer to this, so I don't know why I'm using this one, to be honest. It does mix it a little bit better, so I don't have to do all this scraping around the edge quite so much. Okay, and I'm going to try that, because, as I said, how you bind your stuff together, yeah, look, that's better. It's not falling apart as I drop it. If I was doing this in my bath bomb press with those moulds, I would need a drier mix than if I'm doing it in something like a hand press. And again, that's something that you just need to play around with. Right, so I am going to put some embeds in this, but what I'll do first of all is I will always have a go just to see if this is going to hold together before I put the embeds in. I don't know how much this mould will hold because it's new. So I'm just going to fill it up. I may not fill it up to the top, we'll see how big it's going to be, because obviously I need to think about, yeah, see 155, I'm going to take a little bit out of that. Right, so let's see how this presses. I'm just going to press this one by hand first of all. Okay, so once I've pressed it, I'm going to slide the outside down and remove the top. It's come off nice and cleanly, so my print's nice. And then I always have, I've got a whole bag, can you see here, of cardboard squares that I keep. So I just find it easier at this point. I would take my cardboard square, or rectangle in this case, turn my bath bomb upside down, and then let's see if we can get the top off, see if that pattern will come out. Yay, that's come out really nice. Can you see I've got a couple of tiny little bits in there, but I would be expecting that. And that has pressed really nicely. Can you see how pretty that is? So I'm happy to now go ahead and start making these with embeds in. Now, if I put embeds in that now and it didn't work very well, then I'd be in trouble and I'd have to try and separate all this and the embeds, the same as if I was doing a bath bomb maybe that had two different colours. If I did it with the two different colours, then you've then got a mess to deal with if it didn't work. Okay, so I always test it first of all, as simply as possible. Right, okay. Now, what I always find is important, especially with a fiddly mould, is keep it really, really dry. That's how I find it works best for me. And the other thing I do is I always have a little tiny pot, I need some more in here, of some corn flour. And if I get any sticky bits, I will just rub over the mould like that with the corn flour, just to make sure it really dries off well. Now, obviously with this being a white bath bomb, the white corn flour is not going to show up, but I would tap it off anyway. Otherwise, do that, just bang it off afterwards, and that's going to be fine. Okay, so let's start doing these. What else do I need to show you? Oh yes, I use one of these Arbor presses for my bath bombs that I press by hand. Now, this is just an Arbor press that I bought. Now, it's got this never need thing on here. What I did though is I bought a kit for mine that puts this, gosh, I don't know how well you can see, this sort of white plunger thing on the bottom of my Arbor press and this disc. Okay, it's called Never Need, and what it's done, what it's made for is for polymer clay. People who need polymer clay, and it helps with the polymer clay. So I actually use this when I've got a load of soap dough to knead. I actually use this to help me knead my soap dough, and I also use it as a press for my bath bombs as well. Right, so there's that, and then the next thing is my embeds. Now I'll do a video on how I make these at some point. I make these like stripy embeds, like this. So rather than putting individual embeds in, I find these are just easier to do. These nice stripy sort of rainbow embeds, so I'll be using those. Right, let's get filling this up. Bath bomb mix in. Now you may find it easier to put your bath bomb mix on the top of your scale and then weigh that out from there. The only reason I haven't done that is obviously because I'm putting embeds in it. I want to make this the total weight of my mould. So I'm going to put, actually get a couple in this one, but pack that full of embeds. There we go. Okay, So I think that will do me. Okay, put my top on. And then I'm just going to pop it under my Arbor press and give that a press. You don't need anything like this, you can do it by hand. I just find that, especially if I'm making a lot of bath bombs, this just actually saves my hands a bit by pressing with this. Okay, tap it shut. Release the top. Nice. Slide it down. Get my card. Flip it over. Slide that side bit off. Now you can find you can get some bath bomb mixture stuck in the side there, so it's always good to, if it builds up, start brushing it off because it can make it difficult to release that side. Okay, and then the top. Yay, there we go, that's come out really nicely. Let's have a closer look at that. I'm really pleased with those. They've come out beautifully. I really like that mold's worked really nicely. It's so pretty. Right, so I'm going to carry on pressing those and then I'll come back when I'm finished. I thought I'd just come back as I'm just pressing a few more. I've just changed slightly with my embeds. I'm not putting quite so many in. I'm just taking one embed and what I'm doing is I'm putting it in here off centre, not right on the edge, but off centre. Now the reason I like to do that is when your embeds dissolve, they dissolve faster and with a greater force than the rest of your bath bomb. So therefore, if you put an embed somewhere off centre, so for example, if you do a round bath bomb, just put embeds on bits of the side. If you put it all the way around the edge, they're unlikely to spin. So what will happen with this is because this has got an embed here, it's likely that as that starts to dissolve, A, with it being close to the edge, it will come out quite quickly rather than waiting till the end. And B, it's likely to then make the gnome and the bath bomb move all the way around the bath. Okay, so rather than just popping it in the middle. It's so cute. And what will happen with those is Paul will paint them all beautifully, does lovely little designs on the hats and everything, and does them all different designs. And with the painting, what he does, I'll see if I remember, quite often I'll be doing something, I'll be busy doing something and he'll be painting bath bombs and I'll suddenly come down and he's painted a whole wad of them. If I can catch him doing them, I'll get some. But basically what he does, he gets some mica and dilutes it with rubbing alcohol and then just uses that as a paint. And we typically let the bath bombs dry for about a day before painting them. Paul then does his magic on them and paints them all beautifully, and then we let them dry for another day or so, often just depending on how busy we are, before packing them. And we shrink wrap. It's the only thing we don't, obviously our soaps we don't shrink wrap. We do shrink wrap our bath bombs because obviously it's so important that they don't get any moisture on them. But we do use a biodegradable shrink wrap for shrinking them. So there we go. I've pressed them all now, so here's sort of half of the batch here. I do a batch of about 15 bath bombs each time, and I find that works well because that's the amount that will fit in my mixer, and also that's a nice amount that the mixture stays in a really nice workable state before it starts to either dry out or collect moisture or anything. So I'm now just going to put these aside and wait for them to be ready for Paul to paint. Now I've left them on a little cardboard. That's fine for this time, and it's a nice thing to do so you don't risk moving them when they're still perhaps a little bit fragile. But I do typically find once I've done a whole batch I can move them off the cardboard, but if I don't have to, for example, I don't need my cardboard bits because I'm only making this one batch. Sometimes if I'm making like 6 or 7 batches, I'll need to reuse these cardboard bits. I will move them off. I'm just going to leave them like that so they stay nice and secure, and just going to let those dry, ready for painting. We're back with with some of these bath bombs a couple of days later, and I thought I'll just do a little painting with them. Now, Paul normally does the painting for me, so hopefully I'm not going to muck these up, and he always does a brilliant job. So what I typically do is I've given Paul a list of all the micas, the colours that he can use per bath bomb, which ones obviously tie in with the labels that we've got and tie in with the assessments. And what we do with the micas that we use for bath bombs are just the same as the micas for soaps. So for example here, the black gold, I'll just keep them, spray them with some rubbing alcohol. No particular amount, as it were, just enough to pretty well, you know, just make it the right sort of consistency. And then what we do is, rather than throw these away each time, is we just seal them up and keep them ready to use for the next time. We might need to add a little bit more rubbing alcohol. That's fine. Okay, and that will then just keep them going. Okay, so this is some black gold. And then I like using the rubbing alcohol because it doesn't activate the bath bomb, and also I find you can get it on with a good colour without it being too thick. I know some people use oil and some people use sort of polysorbate 80 as well. I like the alcohol. Okay, it gives me a nice consistency for the paint to go on. Okay, so they're just painting on some little noses. Okay, now these are little hands here, so let's just paint these on as well. Okay, I'll just do one on screen, no need to be doing two. Now these are going to be Valentine gnomes, so therefore I'm not going to do them sort of, Paul often does quite good Christmassy colours, sort of making them look like Santa and all of that sort of stuff, but I'm going to keep to a more, hopefully a Valentine-y theme. So I've got some red riot here, that will be good. That I can use obviously for the heart. So again, a little bit more rubbing alcohol. Now you can just leave these with the lids off, and then the rubbing alcohol will just evaporate and just leave you with mica, but I still then wouldn't try and use that mica in soap or anything. I just keep them for the bath bombs. But if we do, as we're doing bath bombs quite regularly, I find it's fine to just leave them with the alcohol in them. There's a little heart. And my bath bomb mix has got polysorbate 80 in it, so therefore these micas will be okay. I would never choose to colour a bath bomb, actually the bath bomb itself, with mica. That would just be too much mica, and it's likely to give you a problem with staining your bathtub. Which is quite a quick and quite a good way of doing it. Obviously a little bit tricky to just make sure you get the right part of the bath bomb painted. I think I might do some stripes on his hat. Paul does a really nice wiggly stripe. I'm going to try and copy that. I am going to add one more colour on there. There we go. So there's one of our little Valentine gnomes. Let's just going to finish off this second one, and then I'm going to leave Paul to do the rest, because he's bound to do a much better job than me at them. I'm not very good at the painting. Okay, so there's my effort at painting a couple of them. Now these are for sale in the I Dream In soap shop, and there'll obviously be these ones, and there'll also be probably some much better painted by Paul, as he's much better at me than do it, but I thought you'd like to see some of the painting on the video before we signed off. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and you like these really super cute little bath bombs. If you have, it would be great if you gave me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see what I'm making in the future, why not subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching everyone. Happy soaping.